Welcome, David. This is Global Digest think tank. We are doing analysis about geopolitics around the world, especially in Asia Pacific and particularly Burmese issue at the moment. First of all, let me know, David, how long you've been doing for Burmese activity issue and what you have done and what you are planning and how can you share to our viewer, they can get knowledge from you. Please share us.
Thank you. Mingalaba kamya wunta ba de no.
Mingalaba, Jusuwai.
Nicola. Thank you very much for having me on. I first got very interested in Myanmar more than 30 years ago when I was a student and I was studying the politics and conflict of Asia, and Burma just wasn't on the curriculum, and not many people talked about it. So I started reading books about Myanmar history, books by Bertil Lintner and Martin Smith and others about the conflict. And then I started doing a master's of philosophy and chose to study Burma and went to the country for the first time in 1996 when it was the Nawata period.
I was there at the time.
Really? Yep. Yes. So you remember what the situation was like, and unfortunately, Burma now reminds me a lot of what it was like during that period. I think it was a lot more isolationist and the economy was in much worse shape then. But I think, unfortunately, Min Aung Hlaing and the Sita are trying to drag the country back to that period, I think.
To the 1990 period.
Yes.
Bring back to the 1990 period, military regime.
I think so, Saya, unfortunately, because to them, they feel more comfortable when they try and control everything and they don't have to negotiate with anyone. And they don't care how poor and desperate the rest of the country is. As long as they have the power, that's all they really care about.
They did.
And I think that's where Min Aung Hlaing felt nostalgic. I think he wanted to go back to that period. And you can see it in the performance of what they do with their announcements and even some of the political decisions that they're making and the violence that they're using, the state violence that they employ. You
may notice the Burmese military, how they are cruel and how they are violent on innocent people. They shoot on the head of the kids and they brutally shooting and burns houses and villages of innocent people. How it is brutal, compared to other things. Maybe you have already researched. You can have more information too.
I think, I did a lot of research in the past as an academic researcher and for 10 years with Human Rights Watch and documented a lot of terrible things. I'm an independent analyst. I work for various people and I write for various publications. I find in a situation like this, not being tied to one organization means that you can speak more freely. And I think it's necessary to do that for, at least for some people. And I feel more comfortable speaking my mind than having to speak for an organization. Even though there's a lot of good people who work for organizations and have to do that, I'm not criticizing that, but I prefer to speak my own views.
Right.
And one of them is that we cannot trust this military. We cannot trust Min Aung Hlaing. Look at the violence that they're employing. You cannot reason with them, and it's been very frustrating over the past 12 years in Burma, speaking to lots of foreigners who put their hopes and their greed and their agendas onto the military and said that the military have changed. They really want to change and be a good actor. When I did not see any evidence for that. and they were still continuing to kill people in Rakhine State, in Kachin, in Shan, in Karen, and then with the NLD government coming in 2016, I think that Aung San Suu Kyi saw reconciliation as between her and the military. I don't think she saw it as a nationwide reconciliation and a genuine inclusive peace process.
But
and
it's failed, right?
It has failed, absolutely. It failed for the NLD and for Aung San Suu Kyi. The military were not really serious, I think, about these kind of negotiations. They didn't like how
actually we know already from the beginning, since in 1990 I was in Burma. I already know military behavior. They will never agree. They are never doing pure democratization. Then why NLD they don't know that, or why they could not prevent it?
I think because people overlooked that the Constitution of 2008 wasn't a real democracy.
No.
It guaranteed disciplined, flourishing democracy. And, I think that there were many people in Burma, Burmese people, who were trying to say all along, you cannot trust this military, read the Constitution. I remember being in the office of U Koni before he was assassinated, months before he was assassinated. And he was saying, we need to write a whole new constitution. We cannot trust the military. The concern was that a lot of people voted for Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD because it was voting against the military, and because everyone really liked Daw Suu.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think the country, and so I think the military did not like this, where the country was headed, and they wanted to take back control again. Right. And I think miscalculated and thought that a lot of people will accept it.
Big miscalculated. Why there are people, many times I argue and I point out why politicians why they did not know and they did not prepare. If you are a politician, you should know what will happen and what can be a danger, how to prevent. Why they could not able to prevent it. So we know military not good at all at the beginning, but politicians should be very clever to skip or to avoid or to prevent, or they should use many tactics and skill to overcome those military traps. But why fail? I mean, I've been arguing many times. The Suu Kyi failed to engage with, to coordinate with military. And I've been telling in the previous video about Suu Kyi herself is a liberal democratic minded person. And most of NLD members, they are not. They are still, they are remaining leftist ideology. The Burmese problem is that one problem, ideology problem. Many they say democracy, but their actual mindset is a leftist ideology. That might be not, consist, or and Suu Kyi could not drag them to reach democratization, because a lot of our members leftists, and they could not prevent it, or they don't want to prevent it. They deliberately remain in leftists, and they have many similar with military and Buddhist ideology, leftist ideology, that were obstacle for democratization. But Suu Kyi did not realize that. So Suu Kyi, if she is a politician, she should also know that. Why she did not prepare, and she should, argue, she should selected very intelligent people who were very liberal, democracy, intellectual people. But surrounding her, not those people.
Mm.
That is my argument. That about in political point of view, you know. So by the way, you have been for 10 years in Human Rights Watch on Burmese issue. What you found and what you have advocated in order to change those authoritarian military regime to closer to the liberal democratization, or what you can do and what you cannot do. Something, why don't you share us?
I think, given the nature of international human rights organizations,
Yes.
There was a lot of optimism in Burma from 2012 on that the country was opening and changing, and there were there were a lot of changes, and there was a lot more opening than people thought. But there were still many problems, and the thing with international human rights organizations is you've got to be critical when there's things that are still bad, when bad things are still happening to people. So Human Rights Watch was still quite critical of the Thein Sein administration. And then was also very critical of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the NLD, especially in 2016, when there was horrific military violence against the Rohingya Muslims in Rakhine State. Because she tried to deny it. And so I think the lesson there is that even when people think that there is this big success story and this is an opening and a democratic transition and a country opening up from authoritarianism, there's still lots of problems. And I think early on, we were trying to say to people that Daw Aung San Suu Kyi needs to be a better politician.
Yes.
Because I always remember an interview that she gave, which was really quite shocking, when she was asked if she was still a promoter of humanitarianism and human rights, and she said that, you know, I've always been a politician. I've never been, you know, into humanitarianism or human rights. And I thought, well, that's not true. You have been, actually, for a long time. That's how you got internationally famous and how many people in Burma supported you. And you won the Nobel Peace Prize and you won lots of other humanitarian prizes. And for her to kind of say that, I thought, okay, now we have to view her as a politician. And unfortunately, she was not a very good politician at all. She did not build coalitions. She made enemies when she didn't need to. She was far more arrogant than she realized. She could have had civil society and many other aspects of Burmese society, including the media, including workers' rights and workers' organizations and trade unions, and many others. She could have had all of this cross-section of Burmese society working in an anti-military coalition. And she didn't. She just thought, she is the leader, that is it. Whatever she says goes. And it had the effect of polarizing people against her, even though many people voted for her in 2020. And then when the coup happened, she didn't really have many people to turn to.
Yeah.
And she should have had most of the country, including Rakhine politicians, including all the different Shan political parties, including you know, lots of different people in the country, former political prisoners, many others who were like, okay,
all are run away. All are run away. Our senior member, and even, you know, 88 generation, all these protest leaders, all are run away.
That's right. So and they were
eventually arrested.
Yeah. And so many of them were critical of her before the coup. And so unfortunately, she wasn't as intelligent a political leader as she should have been, realizing that, you know, if this is all about the army and getting rid of the military,
She doesn't have it, even one. She doesn't have it.
No. And so it's very frustrating to look back and think, you know, what is happening right now to Daw Aung San Suu Kyi? She does not deserve to be in custody. She does not deserve all of these legal cases against her. It is a political show trial. Her and the president should be released immediately. So should nearly 10,000 other people who don't deserve to be in prison. We've got to remember that even though she made all these mistakes, what is happening to her now is completely unacceptable.
Judicial system is no more working now. That is absolutely, fraud judicial system in Burma.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that the SAC is saying all of these really terrible things about the conduct of the elections in 2020. On the day, everyone agrees that on the day of the voting, it went very smoothly. There was hardly any violence, even though there were some problems beforehand with cancellations in Shan State and especially in Rakhine State. But on the day, mostly due to Burmese school teachers who were working as polling station officers, a lot of people came out. It was a high turnout, and it was very clear that it was a big victory for the National League for Democracy, and lots of seats that went to the SNLD and to one of the Mon parties as well. So by and large, even with this three-quarter disciplined, flourishing democracy, it was clear that the NLD won, and people voted for Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, but also against the military. It was a clear repudiation. We don't want the military back.
Definitely.
And I think
Burmese people show clearly they want democracy. They don't want military authoritarianism. So that's right. You know what.
And when you speak to many people, they realized that the country still had many challenges, many problems. The military was still there. But they also realized that generally it was heading in the right direction, and that for the younger generation at least, they had a bright future. Even with, and it wasn't perfect. This idea that everything was running extremely well, it definitely wasn't. And there were concerns that the NLD would become a form of democratic dictatorship. That 5 more years of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi could mean that there won't be much progress on the peace process, challenges to economic development, and even strengthening of institutions to make them truly independent.
Kind of like that, something like that.
Yeah, and but again, just to stress, there is no justification for the coup at all. There is not a single shred of justification for that coup. And in the early days, you saw some people, foreigners included, saying, well, it is constitutional. Absolutely not. It's ludicrous. And, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi had 5 years to try and change the constitution, to try and make it more difficult for them, to constitutionally stage a coup. But, it was right there laid bare. This is unconstitutional.
Right.
If you do this, it overturned a civilian elected government. And that's what I think people are fast forgetting now. And the SAC says, oh, there'll be elections in 2023. And all of these foreigners are like, well, we don't want to put any more pressure on the SAC, and we want things to be normal inside Burma now so that we can all keep our jobs going. And so, yes, elections, 2023. So I really fear for the future in Burma, because the violence just keeps getting worse in so many different places.
Sure.
The SAC keeps arresting large numbers of people, and everyone wants to make Yangon and Naypyidaw these normal kind of areas where they can all live safely, when the rest of the country is in grave danger on a daily basis.
It's true, because it's anarchy, at the moment it's anarchy, and military won't give up their control in the country, especially the top regime, the elite group. They won't give up. It means if they give up, their regime is finished. So that's why they won't give up. So it will be anarchy. How many years? I can't say, but it is really happening. Is unfortunately in Burma. Yes.
Yeah, I don't see any nationwide situation where the military says, we need to negotiate, we need to get rid of Min Aung Hlaing,
They won't do that. They won't do that.
They just won't do that. And I just
Especially especially Asian country like China, many other country who are not really interested in democracy, who are left-wing countries, especially they don't care at all about democracy, and they are happy to be, see the military control in the country. So that is in the Asian region. There's no hope to rely on those Asian region countries to support democratization. But we should hope from, liberal democracy country, from Western country, America, European. But why they are not put much effort to do democratization in Burma? So that's I feel not satisfied. So why they are not able to put a big effort to democratization? Because you see already the people willing for democracy, overwhelmingly they willing to do that. So we need, internal energy is not enough to crack down the military regime. So we need external energy to do that. If we do together, it is possible chance to crack down military. But why you feel they are so silent and not put energy to effort that?
I think, sadly, the West is simply too distracted with the war in Ukraine, post COVID-19 economic recovery.
Even before Ukraine, they are silent,
Even before Ukraine, I think that there was a sense of
and
most of the past year. I think it's like we gave this problem almost exactly a year ago. We gave this problem to ASEAN, to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and mostly because of Min Aung Hlaing. That engagement has just not worked. I mean, you can be very critical of ASEAN, and I am, but they weren't even given a chance to even try. I think during Brunei's tenure and now Cambodia's tenure.
The military did not allow the ASEAN delegate. Even they cannot enter. So it's far away to implement the agreement. So they cannot enter. I
mean, it simply can't work if there's no regular discussions. And now I think the danger is that there will be one meeting, the United Nations Special Envoy will come, and there will be a meeting with Min Aung Hlaing, and they will walk out and they will say, "Oh, it's a first meeting, and we're embarking on negotiations, and this is a good first step." I've seen this so many times over the past 30 years. This good first step, and then the Myanmar military basically just stalls. And that's when everyone, the United Nations and all the other donors and countries like Australia and especially the European Union, they all say, look, things are changing. These are generals that we can deal with. It's ma'ala pue, it's just their performance art, and it's not meaningful at all. And so I think the only friend that the people of Myanmar really have is probably America. They're giving lots of money, but the rest, I think, just want to get back to trading and do a lot of trade with China, but also with the rest of the countries of Southeast Asia. And I think they've already betrayed Burma. And so I know it's a very painful thing to have to say, but I think people in Burma can only really depend on themselves, them and people like you outside the country that are helping. I would not expect beyond some humanitarian assistance. I wouldn't expect any help from Western countries, because they all want things to go back to some sense of normalcy. and all the foreigners who were living in Rangoon, they just want to close their eyes to all of this and keep their jobs and keep their lifestyles and not really have to acknowledge what is happening.
Let's hope.
And
Yes.
you know, the evidence is there, but it's just that when you point this out to them, they get very, very angry and say that they really care. Well, if people really cared about the future of Burma, they would be acting very differently.
Sure.
You know, all of their actions are, we don't really care. We just want to get things back to normal and for our interests to be guaranteed. And so, unfortunately, I don't see that they're, you know, even with sanctions, even with resolutions in the United Nations and resolutions in various parliaments, and even, you know, the meetings with the National Unity Government. You know, these are all just like little steps of like, yes, we're with you, but really, no, you should be meeting members of ethnic resistance forces and the National Unity Government far more. You should be finding ways as much as you can to support them directly,
Yes.
and realize that they're the best hope that you have. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the West who are like, oh, they'll become extreme and the violence will be really extreme. Well, it's the Sitar that's extremely violent. They're the ones who are killing thousands of people. And if you don't want some of the PDFs and the ethnic resistance organizations to get more extreme, then you have to help them in some way.
Yes.
So that's my concern, that through neglect, I think the West is kind of, you know, condemning Burma into the spiral of violence. And, you know, China, Russia, and Japan don't particularly care either.
No.
I mean, I think Japan cares more than those two countries, but
even they don't want to. Even they don't want to make in their meeting minute. They don't want to put Burmese issue because they said we just busy with other agenda, and they even not want to put deliberately. They don't want. They excluded Burmese in the agenda. So that is very you know, disappointment in Asian countries. But as you point out, I agree that the NUG and those NLD, the elected leader, they are lack of strategy. They are poor intellectual knowledge, geopolitical knowledge, and international system. And they even don't want to cooperate with other experts, and they want to go ahead by themselves alone, something like that. So as you point out, that I agree that. And I want to know more about, as you are human rights activist, you have a long time experience in human rights. So you may found a lot of human rights violation in Burma during your tenure, even now, more than 10 years. And why don't you can bring it up to the international body, Human Rights Commission and UN system, and to do some more action from international system? Is there no way to do such action, or you don't have sufficient evidence or document? But I guess you found many evidence and documented. So what are you feel you could do, and you have more suggestion?
You know, unfortunately, there is so much evidence and documentation about human rights violations in Burma, going back many years. I mean, one of the first Amnesty International reports was in the 90s and in the early 1990s, and there were reports in the 1980s from foreigners. You know, the International Labour Organization had a massive report in the late 1990s. The commission.
When I was in Burma, a lot of forced labor. I agree.
Yeah. Lower pay was everywhere, and I fear that could make some kind of a return. And again, the ILO is doing another commission of inquiry into labor abuses against against workers since the coup. You know, I don't know how many reports I worked on when I was with Human Rights Watch, and colleagues in Amnesty International did a lot of reports. The Burmese human rights documentation community did so much fantastic work, from women's groups to groups like the Korean Human Rights Group. There was so much very good documentation, powerful documentation that was produced, over the past 30 years. And the evidence is damning and something that you can't dispute. Then I think what happened was, when things started opening up, the rest of the world was like, we don't want to talk about that anymore. We don't want to talk about
Why not?
Yeah, because it's inconvenient. Because then you would have to say, well, what happened? And it's like, well, this military that you're going to Naypyidaw and you're thinking are really nice and changing. We're doing all of these horrible things to multiple people around the country for many, many years, and they've gotten away with it. And so I think that there was a lot of international complicity in not pursuing any kind of truth-telling and reconciliation in the early part. Now, of course, it's so obvious to many people that this is what the military is really like. I remember lots of foreigners being very critical in 2015, of being very critical of me in 2015 for being so critical of the military. And then in 2017, when the horrific violence against the Rohingya was being unleashed, so many of them were just shocked. And I said, you've got to be crazy. Don't take my word for it. There are literally millions of people in this country that could tell you not to trust the military, and that this is what the military does.
Many evidences.
So much evidence. And I think the important thing is to shift where we're talking about human rights documentation and talking about justice and accountability. Recognizing that it's important what the Human Rights Council does, and it's important, this IIMM, the independent investigative mechanism, the International Criminal Court, even the International Court of Justice on the genocide, case. All of this is really important, but I think we need to refocus on domestic documentation, and Burmese people actually kind of pursuing forms of documentation and real justice, and making this a national approach, and doing it in a way that kind of creates a distance from foreigners who want to do it in their image. There's a lot of there've been a lot of programs in the last 10 years throwing money at justice initiatives in Burma, but it was all very foreign imposed. And I think it's important now for Burmese organizations to actually do the documentation and to do the education around this, and not so much in international focus. And also to have a conversation that's about domestic justice that is not waiting for international accountability measures. I just, that could be years in the making, and Burmese people shouldn't have to wait.
Sure.
And also think that when you start doing things like that, it sends a very powerful message to the international community that we're not going to put up with what you did last time. We're not going to put up with you saying, let's just sweep this under the carpet and open up. There's a point of negotiation. Let's not talk about military violence and military atrocity now. We'll talk about it later. That's a huge mistake. And I do think there's a lot of people in Burma that are not going to put up with that anytime soon. But it's the impulse of elites, Burmese elites, and international elites to do that, just to say, there's the International Criminal Court's doing this, or that mechanism is doing that, that is somehow good enough. I just don't think that should be permitted anymore. And people should be talking about this now, because that's the other thing. A lot of international organizations, the United Nations is definitely one of the worst, in trying to make things more normalized in the country. They won't want to talk about human rights violations, and they will say, that's not us, that's the Human Rights Council, that's the UN Special Rapporteur. No, this is happening to Burmese people, and they should be listening to Burmese people.
Then why Human Rights Watch out point them, United Nations and any international organization, why they are refraining or irresponsibility Human Rights Watch should more pressure there?
I mean, you'll have to ask someone at Human Rights Watch.
No, during your time.
During my time, we were pretty critical of the international community, quite a lot actually. And unfortunately, there just wasn't a lot of international support for it. I mean, again, the United States is one of the few countries that actually really supports human rights promotion in Myanmar. The rest of the countries pretend to, but they actually don't really that much. The UN, the UN's basically like, yes, of course, you know, there's one UN and rights up front, all of these other things that they say. But the UN is masterful at saying one thing and doing completely the opposite. And on human rights, they shouldn't be trusted at all. You know, and most people within the UN don't like the UN Human Rights Council.
Right.
So unfortunately, I think we've got to understand that international human rights organizations have a very important role to play, but it doesn't mean that they can be transformation. And we shouldn't just be looking at the international community. And that, you know, resolutions in the Human Rights Council, you know, very good, very welcome. The reports of the UN Special Rapporteur, very welcome, but they have no impact on the military. Okay, and it's not
there is no way to
no impact.
There is no way to do impact.
No.
So
no, I think the only way to get at the military is to go after their money, go after their ability to manufacture weapons. And what they're really afraid of is justice from their own people. I think they're far more afraid of what the people of Sagaing or Sanchang or Mandalay will do to them than they are with the International Criminal Court. And I think that's something that should be emboldening a lot of people in Burma now is you have to tell the military it's our justice that you will face. It's not some, you know, maybe down, you know, many years down the road in The Hague. It's the justice of the Burmese people that they should be worried about.
Yes, I agree very much about, as you point out, you know, international society, international institution, and international, you know, organization failed the policy to tackle the Burmese issue, either, you know, diplomatically or either funding, overseas assistance, you know, they are not reached the point. They could not hit the point, you know. They are not doing here and they are just doing here and there, but not really hit any point. So as you said, definitely as international funding, they fund many human rights organizations, many NGO, many political party, many group, women group, any group, they pay, but so far they could not hit the point, you know. Just the money is like water, they pour out and there's nothing, you know, significant thing and nothing bring for liberal democracy in Burma or in other change step. And the fund is going to repeatedly again and again, same process, same people probably, and same activity, but nothing hit the point. As you point, I agree very much. They have failed, and diplomatically also failed. They are blaming here and there Asian country. We forget about Asian country. You know, they are not doing, especially funding. Japan may do, but they are not really funding given to the human right or some democratization. They are more you know, their own interest or economic interest, something like that. And European and America, they pay more human rights and those democratization funds. But now that's also declined. And also it was not effective. As you point out, I agree, they are failed, and in spite they pay very less amount compared to any other country, their assistance is not good enough and not significant and cannot achieve anything. So we need to revise all this policy, and we should put, very concrete policy with the expert, liberal democratic scholar. And I strongly recommend they must include liberal ideology minded and who are intellectual in order to genuine democratization in Burma. Otherwise, you will be, turning around and around. You did not reach any point. So it should be cooperate between Burmese liberal expert and international scholar activists like you and other scholar, policy, geopolitics, human rights expert. All this we need together, because coordination and cooperation also lack and poor strategy. That won't reach the point. It may be pour the fund, but it won't reach any point, Same group, same activity, same people. Just turn around. It's enough, It's long time it's been doing like that. So we need to change overall international system, support in the Burma and international fund for the Burma. Everything we have to be fresh to make policy again.
I agree. Yeah.
So, so far, as your human rights activist, so how do you find Burmese crisis should be addressed, either a human rights point of view or geopolitical point of view, and how Western will be likely to cooperate and support? Even right now, Burmese, domestic Burmese people themselves are doing revolution. They need weapon and they need some assistance. They know why it cannot reach to them. That Western country has good enough capacity. Even they could not do some, if they can support them, it will be big game changer. But so far they are not responding.
I unfortunately can't see that the kind of support for the armed resistance, military assistance. I really cannot see any in the international community providing that, and it's to the NUG, the PDFs, the ethnic resistance organizations. It is
just disappointment, right?
It's very disappointing, especially given the scale of the assistance to the Ukraine. And you can agree with that, but you can also agree that even though Russia didn't invade Burma, the Burmese military invaded Burma, and they invaded their own country. And it is invasion of a different type, but it's still an attack against the Burmese people. I think the fear is that do you transfer weapons in that is actually going to be far more destructive and prolong the war and more people die? Or do you hope for some kind of neat surgical strike against the leadership of the military, which I think is unlikely? I mean, all of the scenarios for injecting
I don't
weapons,
know what will be some kind of strategy that could be done. Right now, they are the last option of armed resistance,
And I think, internationally, people shouldn't be seeing this just as a human rights issue, because I think that was the mistake that was made during the 1990s and the 2000s, that that Burma was this feel-good human rights issue with Aung San Suu Kyi as the leader, and it was fundamentally about a human rights issue, when people then didn't take into account the massive challenges towards ethnicity and identity, of economics, of regional trade and development, and geostrategic interests. I mean, 20 years ago, it was obvious that China was eyeing off a greater role to be had in Burma, and it was, a few years ago, you weren't allowed to mention that there was a new Cold War and it was the West against China and Japan was involved. Now it's of course incredibly obvious. And the danger is that if you just see Burma as a human rights issue from now, you don't see the major challenges with the armed resistance, with the impacts on the economy, the impacts on society. I think there's way too much optimism that the Burma majority and many ethnic nationalities are somehow together and united against the SAC. I think that's way too premature. That there will just by default be all of these divisions.
Now we can say they are the best, joining together the biggest ethnic Burman and other minority ethnic groups. They are fighting together now. Every state and every city, they fight against the military. So now they are joining, but their strength is very short enough. Yes. I mean, especially weapon, Then
weapons and ammunition, and I think that's going to be, the major challenge moving forward is to be able to sustain the military operation like this. But one thing that I think will that we have to keep into account is that the Sitha will continue to be very brutal. They will continue to perpetrate atrocity, which will mean a lot of people around the country, from Magway to many other places, will continue to resist, because the military is not showing any restraint. The military is not showing any sign that they want to have a peaceful resolution of this. And so I do see that one of the only ways forward is just continued violence, because it's a fight for many people's survival. And from Karenni to Karen to Kachin and Sagaing, all of these places, people will continue fighting, and it will get very, very complicated. And there will be deals done in places like Shan State, Rakhine, and many others. And there'll be a lot more social divisions within the Burma community, between the Burma and other ethnic groups. Even though, as you say, that a lot more cooperation than there was maybe a year ago, but still there's a lot of very deep divisions there. And they will be doing a lot of this resistance when the international community really won't care, and will eventually start saying, we want you to find a deal, give up, let's get some progress out of this. And I think there will be a further division will be created there, that the majority of people in the country get very angry towards the international community and don't trust them anymore, even though they need a lot of international funding for humanitarian needs. And so I think that we're in for a very uncertain and violent future. I think where there's going to be a lot more divisions being created, and the military should realize that this is unsustainable. This whole idea that it's the resistance that should give up because this is unsustainable. No, I think what everyone should realize around the world is that for the military, the future is untenable. They have to find a way out of this. And they've shown no sign whatsoever that they're interested in that. So people should keep resisting. I think that's the only way.
Yeah. You don't think, that, as you said, definitely there are many divisions, even within ethnic groups or within big ethnic group, or horizontally and vertically still remain division. It is not easy to, bring all of them together. Never it will happen. And so what my point is the most potential and possible way is at least you can make a good direction, the policy with very knowledgeable who are intellectual. I strongly believe only liberal democracy minded people should be relied on. You cannot rely on left wing and those other things, you know. I mean, they can support, but for a long time, for long-term policy and for long-term movement, because left-wing ideology background, they are in and out, they are changeable easily. You know, that's why we have to be aware. So right-wing, you know, most, as I made analysis in previous video, there are some uh, right-wing reliable small group like any Christian state and those democratic strongly supported state are more, they are long term, they are faithful for liberal democracy. So you have to consider all these factors to build long-term liberal democratization in Burma. So what we need is, of course, there are a lot of lack of knowledge in Burma. Definitely, it's still lack of knowledge. Even many people say they have a scholar or whatever, but still lack of knowledge, in my point of view. So we still need to do sufficient knowledge or use for Burmese democratization. So we need to small, you know, whoever expert on liberal ideology and within Burmese scholar, expert, plus international scholar expert who are very serious and who willing to do and who are interest for Burmese democratization. We can gather and make a very serious and long-term policy together and to lay down the foundation, and we can build for long time until we reach the goal. Based on that foundation, we should go and build. Otherwise, you know, without sufficient policy, you know, we will fail. As we discussed, it will be turn around. We won't reach the goal. We want to reach the goal, you know. We have to make fast policy. It's tangible or is you know, it's feasible for full liberal democratization. The policy should be available. So far, we don't have available, very feasible policy. There are many people are drafting policy here and there, but not feasible for real liberal democratization. If you are expert on geopolitics or, you know, international politics and Burmese internal politics. If you combine all these, you know, issue, you make strategy solid all together, and then only you can make the goal, the top policy. So if you have clear policy, we can implement it, and we can keep going, and long term we can reach that goal eventually. But if unless you have that proper policy, you know, we will see fail again and again. In 1988, fail again, 1996, fail again, 2007, fail again, now fail again. Stop all of them, you know, even those who very famous or whoever supported, we appreciate it, but you have to retire now. We have to do a new, fresh policy and the feasible for overall for the Burmese new road for liberal democratization. So that is my idea. I've been sharing and analyzing with many scholars, in previous video. And I don't know how do you think the Western country, America, European policymaker and the Western funding assistant were willing to cooperate for Burmese genuine liberal democracy building based on those feasible policy with together West, I mean, international scholar and Burmese scholar. How do you think will be convincible or they won't pay attention?
In the past several years before the coup, they put hundreds of millions of dollars into democracy promotion and governance and supporting political party reform and the elections they want to keep basically keeping some of that going, but without any clear direction as to where it will go.
It's not clear.
No, and there's still lots of talk about federalism, but it's a very divided discussion as it always has been.
Infeasible. Infeasible.
Yeah, and it's also all of these competing visions, and lots of international donors want it to be like Switzerland or this country or that country or that country. And so there's a lot of donor competition, which creates a lot of confusion. And then there's a lot of disagreement about different kinds of models. And eventually people just get bogged down into not really talking about what's important, which right now is the overthrow of the military. And, you don't need all these ministries in the NUG. I think you don't need a ministry for federalism because, you've got to concentrate on actually destroying the military and getting rid of them. Everything else is either humanitarian, but fundamentally this has got to be a Burmese solution. It's got to come from Burmese people, and I think many foreign efforts should realise you're just there to support, and that the generational change, the coming together of various groups and working together, that all should be homegrown without the interference of any foreign organizations. And they should realize that their one goal should be to help fund this and to fund it very generously. But to not meddle and not to make it about their interests, because increasingly I think you'll find that for the Americans, it's all about containing China. For the British and the European Union, it's all about trade in Southeast Asia and trade with China.
Actually, that is my point. Is that's all related. If you have clear ideology, if you cannot support liberal ideology like Burma and any other country in the region, you have to keep competition with those China and other things. The West has to suffer again and again. So if you able to only build a strong liberal democratization in the region, the West has no more need to competition. It will be safe for them. That is the point. But I don't know, they are not relies on, or they are lazy to do, or they are reluctant to do, or I'm not sure. That is geopolitics. That is the thing, To prevent your own possession, you need to build something, ideology in the region. Only then you can save. Otherwise, the West are going to suffer ideology, reflection with any other trade or any other geopolitics, or it will keep suffering. So that's why. So I've been talking with other scholars and experts. We have to build a liberal democratic society in Asia. So if we have strong Asia liberal democratic society, the West and Europe, America will be safe as well. That is the key point. But maybe everybody not relies on, or they may not pay attention, or they're not aware at the moment. I guess so.